Do you know how to be patient? What was that like for you? How many seconds was that? Do any of you want to skip ahead to the next thing? Patience isn't one of those virtues that's easy to come by. And since it's the next in the line of the fruit of the Spirit that we need to talk about, yeah, why not play with the word patience just a little bit? Now, what I would love to do is just talk about culture today, about patience, and then impatience. You feel me? Well, your generation, those of you who are like millennials or what's after that, Gen Z, Zoomers, right? I'm not sure if you realize what kind of a world you live in. And I don't mean that like to shut you down or anything. I'm an older millennial myself, but what that means is I'm one of the last generations that remembers what it was like before the internet. And I don't want to just say the same old things that you're used to about the internet being terrible and whatever. Granted, there are some bad things about it, but it is a tool that's helped us to figure out, like when Notre Dame was burning over in Paris, we all found out about it within a minute, less, you know? Well, here's one of the things that at least those of us who are a little bit older than you are realizing. You think being overstimulated is normal. That's it. Really. In some sense, what your understanding of what is normal stimulation is what previous generations would say is being overstimulated. You got too much going on, too many things to see, too many things to hear. And so what happens is then sometimes you, well, and I guess even older people too, can get real impatient. Because as a culture, we've all gotten used to being overstimulated. And so when we are average stimulated, we are bored with the normal amount of stimulation. Now, again, stimulation, I mean things that we see, things that we hear. We need to be moving fast. We need to be doing all these things. And so as a result, we've all gotten rather impatient with the normal pace of life that humans have known for thousands of years. In some sense, here we are in North America, and what we like to call now is the technological age. Before that was the industrial age, and then just before that was agricultural, right? Farming. There's no doubt in my mind that farmers have a much better understanding of patience than those of us who were raised with technology. How many of you watch the first 10 minutes, or 10 seconds really, of a YouTube clip and then you go on to the next video if it seems too boring within the first 10 seconds, 15 seconds maybe? What's going on that Instagram stories, these single frames are probably no more than 5 or 6 seconds. What was up with Vine, right? Vine is just about the same thing. You could even say the same thing about TikTok, right? 6, 10 seconds at most, right? What's going on there that we can only take in information in 6 to 10 seconds before we get bored and move on? Sounds like we're really impatient. But you know what? Some of the really big and heavy and most beautiful topics of life can't be summed up in 10 seconds. So we've got an issue going on in culture because I wonder if the technological age is working against all of us learning how to have patience. Patience is an interesting virtue. It really is. And whether you've noticed it or not, I actually don't do much theology. Yeah. Now, theology means God words. It's the words that we speak about God. And what my goal is actually to not even do anthropology, which is anthropos, or that'd be man, logi, and then so that'd be words about man. I don't like to do words about God or words about man. What I hope to always be doing is theoanthropology, that we should always be talking about the God-man, Jesus, who was both God and man. Now, why is this important? Why do I bring this up? Well, because when we look at Jesus, we we don't just stop and say, that's what God's like. When we look at Jesus, we should also hopefully say, that's what humanity can be like. And so in the same breath, when we talk about Jesus, we're doing theoanthropology. We're talking about what God is like and what humanity is like. Well, Jesus was a very patient person. He was certainly patient with all these disciples that seemed to constantly misunderstand him. He was certainly patient with some of the refuse of society, some of these really hurt and troubled people who were cripples or lame, some of the outcasts of society. Sounds like he was very patient with them. He didn't just like scoff them off as if they were the refuse of the world. He actually said, no, these people are in the image of God. We need to take care of them. But you know what? There were times when it seemed like Jesus got impatient. So what's up with that? Like in the beginning of John's Gospel, is it John's Gospel? I'm blanking right now. Anyways, Jesus flips over the tables in the temple because they're actually starting to sell things in the temple. And so they're profiteering, they're making money off of other people's faith in a way that's like really kind of dirty because it's happening within the the temple walls. So I don't know. As I was thinking about this video, as I was thinking about what to say to y'all, I was struck by, patience is a good thing about some things. But then I thought, it's actually important to be impatient about other things. And it seems that we've got those things mixed up. I think we get impatient about things that don't really matter. And we're patient with things that we really shouldn't be. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in order to say that God is patient, we also, in the same sentence, have got to learn to say God is patient because he is wise. And it's hard to be patient if you aren't wise. And wise means that you have wisdom, but it means that you have a framework that you can look at the world and you can determine what things are good or bad, or what things are helpful or unhelpful. And so when we say God is patient, at the same time, we've always got to say that God is also wise, because God was wise when he was patient with Jonah, the prophet. You remember the one that got swallowed by the whale because he ran in the opposite direction that he was supposed to go? Well, God could have struck him right there, but instead God had him swallowed by a giant fish and then spit him back up on the shore that he should have gone to at the beginning. God's patient with the city of Nineveh in that story. They're a whole city full of the worst people that just trample over others. That was the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And God chose to be patient with them, so much so that it made Jonah so furious that he said this, quote, "I'm so angry I could die." It's like, what is going on? God is that patient with certain people that it even makes a prophet of God angry because that prophet was impatient about that. Well, it's very difficult for your generation, especially if you're under roughly the 24 years old. Yeah, I mean it, because the front part of your brain isn't fully developed yet. It's called the prefrontal cortex. Now, what that means is, if that part of your brain isn't fully developed, that's the part of your brain that can comprehend consequences. That's why we don't let people who are under 18 buy cigarettes. And I think there's some legislation about changing that potentially. But that's why we don't let people under a certain age make certain decisions. That's why we don't let 10-year-olds drive cars. The idea that consequences could come from your actions is literally something that some of you can't figure out yet. You can't imagine that kind of a future. But that's also a part of wisdom. We've all got to learn, as we grow up, to also grow in wisdom so that we can determine what is good and what is bad, what is helpful and unhelpful. And when we grow in wisdom, then we can also grow in patience towards the right things. I was really struck this week by learning more and more about the life of John Lewis. That dude was patient about the right things, and he was impatient about the right things. He saw certain things that needed to change, and so God about that. He wasn't going to sit back and be, the word is passive, where he just sat back and let things continue on and think that being passive is the same thing as being patient. That's not true. What I would love to do is invite you into your own theoanthropology. Remember, that means God-humanness. You can be like God, and you can be like the man Jesus if you make a point to grow in wisdom so that you can grow in patience. Because all life long, all of us, from the youngest to the oldest, we all have to learn how to continue growing in our ability to discern what is good and what is bad, and between what is helpful and unhelpful, so that we can be patient about the right things. Because being patient, I don't know, it's tough. Go back to the beginning of this video. Were any of you getting impatient? Was it wise to be impatient in that moment? Were you starting to feel certain emotions or an impulse to skip to the next video? Because if so, I don't know, maybe it tells you something about yourself and the ways in which you can grow in this fruit of the Spirit that we call patience. So may you do it this week. May you grow in wisdom so that you can grow in patience, just like the God-man Jesus, who is also wise and patient towards the right things in life. That's all. Grace and peace. We'll see you next time. I forgot this light too. Colin, you'll get that one too?